cold rain fell over the city, washing the metal streets in silver light. The wind howled between tall towers as if the world itself was crying. On the high bridge that crossed the Black River, an alien woman named Lyra stood alone. Her small figure trembled in the storm. Her skin shimmered faintly under the streetlights, soft blue like the glow of lost stars. She didn't hold an umbrella. She didn't need one. She wasn't waiting for anyone. She just looked down at the rushing water below, thinking how quiet it would be if she let herself fall. Her people had called her broken. On her home world, every female was expected to bring new life. But Lyra couldn't. No matter what the doctors tried, no matter what ritual she followed, her body never changed. Her name was written in their records as infertile. They said she had no purpose. They sent her away. Since then, she wandered the human city, unseen and unwanted. She tried to smile at crowds, but no one met her eyes. She was a ghost among the living. Now, standing on the bridge, the river whispered her name. Lyra, come home. The thought was soft, dangerous, and peaceful. Maybe the water would take away the pain. Maybe it would erase the memories of her people laughing at her, the faces that turned away when she begged for help. The wind grew colder. She stepped closer to the edge. A sound broke through the storm, an engine. A small ground vehicle rolled to a stop a few meters away. The lights cut through the rain, blinding for a second. A door opened with a creak. Lyra turned her head slowly. A human man stepped out wearing a soaked jacket. His face was calm, though the rain drenched his hair. He wasn't a soldier or a rescuer. He looked ordinary, just a man with kind eyes. "Hey," he said softly, his voice almost lost in the wind. "You shouldn't stand there." Lyra's breath trembled. "Go away, human," she said, her voice sharp and low. "This is none of your concern." He didn't move closer. He just stayed where he was, hands slightly raised as if afraid to scare her. "You don't want to do this," he said again, quieter this time. "The rain's cold, the river's cruel. Come away from the edge." Lyra's eyes burned. "You don't understand," she whispered. "My kind rejected me. I have no worth. I can't give life. I have no future." The man took one step forward, careful and slow. "Then you haven't met everyone yet," she laughed weakly. It was a bitter sound. "You humans always say pretty words. You think they can fix what's already broken?" He looked at her, not with pity, but with something different. Something warm. "I don't think words fix people," he said. "But sometimes they remind us we're still here. And we still matter." Lyra froze. Matter? The word hit her harder than the rain. Her people had used that word only for things, tools, metal, dust. Never for someone like her. She felt her knees weaken, her hands shaking. The bridge under her boots felt endless and small all at once. The man didn't rush toward her. He just stood, waiting, letting her decide. The city lights flickered far below. For a long moment, the world was silent except for the rain. Finally, Lyra took one slow step back from the edge. The man's shoulders relaxed, but he said nothing. He only held out a small thermal blanket he had pulled from his vehicle. She stared at it, then at him. He smiled gently. "I'm Daniel," he said. "I was just driving home. My daughter's waiting for dinner. You can come in, dry off." "No one should be alone in a storm." Lyra wanted to refuse, but her voice didn't come. The warmth of his tone broke something inside her. She nodded once, slowly. He helped her walk to the vehicle, careful not to touch her unless she allowed. When the door closed and the engine started again, she looked back at the bridge through the glass. The water still moved fast, endless, hungry, but for the first time it didn't look like an escape. It looked like a place she had survived. As the vehicle drove away, Daniel glanced at her reflection in the mirror. "You still matter," he said again, so quietly she almost missed it. Lyra turned to the window, watching the city lights blur through the rain. And for the first time in years, she didn't feel invisible. Somewhere deep inside, a small warmth began to grow, a tiny spark of hope, fragile but alive. The rain slowed as Daniel's small vehicle rolled through the empty streets. Inside, the air was warm, smelling faintly of old fabric and machine oil. Lyra sat silently beside him, her glowing blue eyes watching the city lights slide past. Drops of water ran down her silver skin like tears that never ended. She didn't know what to say. She had expected the night to end with silence and darkness, but now, she was sitting beside a human who looked at her as if she still existed. Daniel didn't ask questions. He just drove, his hands steady on the wheel. The sound of the wipers filled the quiet. At last he spoke softly, like he was afraid his voice might scare her away. "You from the outer colonies?" Lyra hesitated. "From the world your people call Sarath," she said. "But I no longer belong there." Daniel nodded slowly, not pressing her. "Sarath," he repeated, as if tasting the word. "Never been there. But I've met a few from your world. Hard-working, strong." Lyra turned her head toward him, her voice almost breaking. "Strong?" she said bitterly. "They called me weak. Useless. They took everything I had because I couldn't bear children." Daniel's eyes stayed on the road. "I don't think being strong means never breaking," he said. "Sometimes it means standing up again after you do." For a moment, Lyra didn't breathe. His words felt too calm, too heavy. Humans had strange ways of thinking, simple words, but they carried power. She closed her eyes, and in the darkness of her mind, she heard again what he'd said earlier. "You still matter." That phrase moved through her like light through glass. Scattering old shadows she didn't know still lived inside her. The vehicle stopped outside a small apartment building, its walls covered with green moss and flickering lights. Daniel turned off the engine. "We're here," he said. "You can rest. You look like you haven't eaten or slept in days." Lyra looked at him, confused. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. "You don't know me." "I'm not even human," Daniel smiled faintly. "You look like someone who needed a reason to stay. That's enough for me." Before Lyra could answer, a soft voice came from the doorway of the building. "Dad?" A small human girl with dark curls peeked out, holding a glowing toy sphere. She looked sleepy but curious. When her eyes met Lyra's, she didn't flinch or hide. She smiled. "Hi," she said simply. Lyra froze. No one had smiled at her like that in years. Not even her own kind. Daniel introduced them gently. "Mira, this is our guest. She's had a long night." The child nodded and stepped closer, holding out the glowing sphere. "You can have it," she said. "It helps when I'm scared." Lyra's hand shook as she accepted the small toy. It was warm, like the little human's heart. "Thank you," she whispered. Inside, Daniel gave her a towel and an old blanket. The place was small but clean. The walls were filled with photos, his late wife, Mira's drawings, and one picture of Daniel in a mechanic's uniform, smiling. Lyra sat on the couch, her gaze wandering to a small frame showing a woman with gentle eyes. "Your mate?" she asked softly. Daniel nodded. She passed. 3 years ago. Mira still talks to her picture. Lyra looked at him quietly. "You still live for your daughter?" He nodded. "Yeah, she's my reason." She lowered her head. "I had none. That's why I went to the bridge." Daniel sat across from her. His eyes were calm, deep like the earth. "You found one tonight," he said quietly. "Sometimes life gives us reasons when we least expect them." Lyra's lips parted, but no words came. His voice wasn't loud, but it stopped something inside her. The endless fall, the noise of pain. Time itself felt slower around his words, softer, almost kind. The whisper that stopped time, she thought. That's what it was. For the first time in her long, lonely life, someone had spoken not to her body, but to her soul. She stayed that night in the small apartment, wrapped in the blanket, watching the city lights outside. Mira fell asleep beside her on the couch, her small hand resting over Lyra's glowing fingers. Daniel checked on them once, smiled, and turned off the light. Lyra looked at the child, at the warmth of this small, fragile human family. Something inside her stirred, an ache that wasn't pain, a warmth that wasn't fire. She realized then, the human father hadn't saved her life. He had reminded her it was still hers to live, and in that quiet moment, with the rain finally ending, Lyra made a silent promise to herself. She would not go back to that bridge again. Not while she could still hear that whisper echoing in her mind. "You still matter." Morning came slowly. The city outside Daniel's apartment glowed pale gold as sunlight broke through silver clouds. For the first time in many days, Lyra didn't wake to the sound of machines or soldiers. She woke to the smell of food, soft, warm, human food. The scent of cooked grains and fruit filled the air. She sat up carefully, surprised to see a small blanket over her shoulders and a little girl asleep beside her. Mira's hair was messy, her hand still resting lightly on Lyra's glowing arm. The alien woman stared at that small hand for a long moment. It looked so fragile, yet it had held her back from the edge of loneliness last night. Daniel entered quietly from the kitchen, carrying 2 bowls. He smiled when he saw Lyra awake. "Morning," he said in his calm voice. Breakfast simple. Hope you don't mind. Lyra blinked at him, confused. You're still here, she said softly. Daniel chuckled. Well, it's my house. Hard to leave. He placed a bowl in front of her. The food was plain, oats, fruit, and warm milk, but to Lyra it felt like something sacred. She hesitated before eating. Her people viewed human food as primitive, but when she tasted it, the warmth spread through her like a memory of sunlight. It's good, she whispered. Mira yawned and sat up, blinking at her alien guest. Morning, Blue Lady, she said with a smile. Lyra tilted her head. Blue Lady? Mira giggled. Your skin shines blue, like my nightlight. Daniel laughed quietly. Mira gives everyone nicknames, he said. You got lucky. Last time I was Captain Pancake. For a moment, the three of them shared a laugh, a small warm sound that felt strange and healing. When breakfast was done, Lyra looked around the apartment. It was small but full of life. Tools on the shelf, tiny shoes by the door, paintings Mira had made with clumsy hands. It wasn't rich or perfect, but it felt alive. Daniel noticed her gaze. I fix city machinery, he explained. Old pumps, heat lines, things most people forget. Not glamorous, but it keeps food on the table. Lyra nodded slowly. You fix things, she said. You mend what others leave broken. Daniel smiled faintly. Sometimes. When I can. Her eyes lowered. Maybe that's why you found me. He didn't answer, but his silence was kind. Later that morning, Mira insisted on showing Lyra her favorite things. Her toy sphere, her tiny music player, and her drawing of Mom, which hung on the fridge. Lyra stared at the picture, a smiling woman holding Mira's hand. The lines were uneven, but the love was clear. Mira pointed to it proudly. That's her. She's watching from the stars, she said. Lyra's throat tightened. Her kind didn't believe in spirits. But somehow hearing a child speak like that made her wish they were wrong. She must have been brave, Lyra whispered. Daniel, standing near the sink, smiled faintly. She was. The day moved quietly. Daniel repaired an old drone engine in the corner, while Mira colored on the floor. Lyra sat by the window watching people in the streets below, humans rushing to work, children laughing in the rain puddles, vendors shouting. None of them looked at her, but for the first time she didn't mind. The world seemed softer from this small room. When the evening came, Lyra offered to help clean. She wasn't used to such kindness without price. Her own people traded favors, not care. She wanted to give something back. As she gathered dishes, her glowing skin reflected in the metal sink. For a moment she saw her face as humans might see it. Strange, delicate, alien, she whispered to herself. Still matter, and smiled slightly. Daniel glanced at her. What was that? She shook her head. Nothing, just... Remembering your words, he leaned back in his chair. Words are easy to forget, he said softly. But sometimes they build bridges stronger than metal. Lyra looked up at him. You humans build many bridges, she said, thinking of last night. Some of them save lives. Daniel met her gaze, and for a heartbeat neither spoke. The silence between them wasn't heavy this time, it was peaceful. Then came a soft knock on the window. A small messenger drone hovered outside, blinking red. Daniel frowned and went to open it. The drone projected a holographic message, static, then clear. To all residents, unidentified alien presence detected in District 12. Report immediately if seen. Lyra's hands froze. Her pulse quickened. They're looking for me, she whispered. Daniel turned off the drone quickly. You're safe here, he said. No one knows. But in her heart, Lyra knew things could change fast. Her people didn't forgive runaways. Still, when she looked at Mira, who smiled at her with sleepy eyes, she made another silent promise. She wouldn't run this time. Not from them, not from herself. As night fell again, the city lights flickered outside. Lyra sat by the window, Mira asleep against her shoulder. Daniel worked quietly at his desk, his tools clicking in rhythm with the hum of the rain. And in that small home filled with warmth for the first time in her life, the alien woman didn't feel like an outcast. She felt like she belonged. Night settled like a soft blanket over the small apartment. The city hummed in the distance, quiet after the rain. Mira slept on the couch, her tiny hand still holding the glowing toy sphere. Lyra sat near the window, watching the streetlights paint gold lines on the wet road. Daniel made tea in the kitchen and brought her a cup. He didn't sit too close. He gave her space, room to breathe, room to choose. For a long time, neither spoke. Lyra held the cup between her hands. The warmth pushed through her fingers like a promise. At last she said very quietly, "You asked nothing. You still helped me?" Daniel nodded. "You didn't need questions tonight," he said. "You needed air." Lyra looked at the steam rising from the tea. "There are things I haven't told anyone," she said. "If I say them out loud, I am afraid I will break." Daniel's voice stayed steady. "You already survived the breaking," he said. "Now you can survive the telling," she swallowed. The words were heavy like stones carried for years. "On Sarath," she began, "a woman's worth is counted in the children she brings. The council says the future is the only proof of value. Girls are tested at a young age. Those who show strong life signal are praised. Those who do not," she paused, "they are watched, measured, spoken about in corners." Daniel listened without moving, his eyes calm and focused like a harbor light. "My test failed 3 times, Lyra continued. "I was sent to the Life Hall, a place of doctors and machines. They told me I was faulty hardware. They said the clan could not carry me. For years I wore white bands to mark my status. No one touched me if they could avoid it. The children learned not to ask me questions because their mothers told them I had no answers." Her hands shook. The tea rippled. "When I was 19, she said, they offered a program. Repair, they called it, injections, thick light. Patches burned into the skin. They said, 'It may hurt, but you will become useful.'" Daniel's jaw tightened, but he didn't interrupt. "It did not repair me," Lyra whispered. "It changed me. My skin glows more now. My bones ache in cold seasons. The machines took what little strength I had. Then they stamped my record. Permanent infertile." Her voice cracked on the last word. "They sent me away with clean clothes and 2 coins. No goodbye. No future." The room was quiet. The only sound was the city breathing through the open window. Lyra rubbed her forearm and the glow brightened under her skin. "Sometimes I think I still hear the machines. A hum in my bones. When I hear it, I remember the Life Hall smell. Metal, hot dust, burned cloth. And I remember the faces. Not angry, worse, empty." She sat very still. "I learned to make my face empty too." Daniel set his cup down. "Thank you," he said softly, "for trusting me with that." Her eyes lifted. "Do humans have places like my Life Hall?" He looked at the photo of his wife on the wall. "Not the same," he said. "But we have other halls. Rooms full of beeping and white coats. Rooms where people wait for news they don't want." He drew a breath. "My wife was strong. She laughed even when days were hard. One winter she got sick. We thought it would pass. It didn't." Lyra's gaze softened. "You stayed with her." "Every day," he said. "I held her hand when the machines were loud. I took the late shift so Mira could sleep. I lied and said the food at the hospital tasted fine." He smiled sadly. "On her last morning, she said 2 things. She told me to keep making Mira laugh. And she said, 'Promise me you will still be kind when the world isn't.'" Lyra closed her eyes. "You kept your promise," she whispered. He shrugged lightly. "Some days I try. Some days I fail. But I keep trying." They sat in quiet again. The pain in Lyra's chest didn't vanish, but it changed shape. It wasn't a knife now. It was a weight she could carry. She touched the glowing skin near her wrist. "My people call this mark the dim brand," she said. "It is meant to warn others I carry no future." She lifted her chin, a small defiant movement. "But tonight your daughter slept against me. I felt her heartbeat. Maybe the council does not understand all the ways a future can live." Daniel smiled. "They don't." The messenger drone's warning from earlier flashed in both their minds. Lyra's shoulders tensed. "If enforcers come," she said, "they will not ask. They will take me back to the hall or exile me to the outer rocks. I will not let them hurt your family." Daniel's voice was sure. "You won't face them alone." She studied him for a long second. "Why?" she asked again, not as a challenge, but as a child might ask, honest, open. He looked at Mira, sleeping, hair in soft curls across the blanket. "Because someone once stood between my family and the storm," he said. "A nurse who stayed late, a neighbor who brought food, a stranger who fixed our heat when the pipes froze. I learned from them. We take turns being the bridge." Lyra breathed in slowly. "A bridge," she repeated. "Not the kind you jump from. The kind you cross," he nodded. "Exactly." A faint thud sounded from the hallway outside. Then another. Lyra's head snapped toward the door. Daniel's face hardened, gentle warmth replaced by careful focus. He turned off the main light and motioned to the interior room. Lyra lifted Mira gently into her arms. The child stirred, then settled against her shoulder with trust that cut through fear like dawn. Another thud, metal scraping lightly, a coded knock. Lyra's glow brightened without her willing it. The mark on her wrist pulsed like a warning beacon. Daniel whispered, "Back room. Now." Lyra carried Mira into the shadowed room. She looked back once. Daniel stood by the door, jaw set, one hand on the manual lock, the other reaching for a worn tool. Heavy, solid, not a weapon, but something he could hold. The coded knock came again, this time followed by a cold, official voice through the door grill. "Open by order of district authority. We seek an undocumented Sarathi female. Compliance is required." Lyra's heart slammed against her ribs. Daniel didn't move. In the dark, holding the sleeping child, Lyra heard his voice from the doorway. Steady, human, unshaken. "She's not a problem to remove," he said. "She's a person, and she's under my protection." The lock clicked. The hallway outside Daniel's door filled with cold light. Blue strips blinked under the crack like a tide creeping in. Lyra held Mira in the dark back room, her skin dimmed by will, her breath steady and small. The child slept against her shoulder, warm and trusting, unaware that the night had turned sharp. "Open by order of district authority," the voice repeated, flat and official. Metal fingers tapped the doorplate. "Failure to comply will result in force." Daniel stood in the living room, the worn tool in his hand, half hammer, half wrench, the kind he used to fix stubborn bolts. He put it down deliberately on the table so the first thing the enforcers saw would not be a weapon, but a working man's instrument. Then he opened the inner latch without turning the door. His voice stayed calm. "I'm here," he called. "There's a child sleeping. Keep your voices low." Silence, then a hiss of radios. When he finally unlatched the door and pulled it open halfway, 3 figures stood in the hall, 2 authority enforcers in dark armor with blank visors, and a thin Sarathi officer with pale, glowing marks on her cheeks. The Sarathi's eyes scanned the room like knives looking for soft places. "Your ID," the lead enforcer said. Daniel handed over his card, the corners worn smooth by years of pockets and pay counters. "Daniel Havel," the enforcer read, then returned it. "We received a report of an undocumented Sarathi female in this building," the Sarathi officer said. Her voice was clean, perfect, practiced. "We track a life sign signature that matches a marked infertile. She is to be relocated per interspecies regulation." Daniel kept his body still. "Relocated where?" "To designated facilities," the officer said. "For safety." "For whose safety?" he asked. The Sarathi's eyes flicked to him, surprised he'd dare a question. The enforcer shifted slightly, boots clicking on old tile. Down the hall a door opened a crack. A neighbor's eye glinted, then vanished. Daniel angled his body so their line of sight into the apartment was narrow. The living room looked ordinary. Tools, photos, a couch blanket. No blue glow. "I have a little girl sleeping," he said again, voice low and steady. "If you come in, you will keep your voices low. If you wake her, you'll answer to me." The lead enforcer stared. The Sarathi officer spoke. "We are within our rights." "And I am within mine," Daniel said. "This is a home. You need a residential entry code or an emergency clause. Show me which you have." The officer's jaw tightened. She raised a palm. A small hollow flickered. It listed a district alert, a search ping, a relocation order, unsigned. "Unsigned," Daniel said gently. "You know the rules. No signature, no step." One enforcer pressed 2 fingers to his helmet, listening. "Authority can secure a signature in minutes. Then come back with it," Daniel said. He didn't move from the doorway. Behind him, the apartment was quiet as a held breath. "I'll still be here. My door will still be a door, not a hole you made." The Sarathi officer studied him, then glanced at the dim apartment. She gestured to the enforcers. "Thermal." A handheld sensor buzzed. The enforcer swept it along the door seam. It hummed over warm walls and cooling tea. When it neared the back room, Lyra held Mira closer, lowering her own temperature the way Sarathi learned to do in harsh winters. Slow, controlled, inch by inch. The sensor wavered, then steadied. 2 signatures, the enforcer said. Adult and minor human, no hot spot. "Look properly," the officer snapped, but the reading did not change. Daniel lifted a shoulder slightly. "May I help you with anything else?" The Sarathi officer took a step forward, testing his stance. He did not retreat. He didn't challenge either. He simply existed like a tree would, real, rooted, inconvenient to move. Water dripped down the back stairwell. The building's old bones popped and settled. "You fix city machines," the officer said, eyes on the calloused hands at his sides. "You keep things running." "When I can," he replied. "Then you understand systems, order, compliance." "I understand maintenance," he said. "Harm a pipe in one place and it bursts somewhere you didn't expect. Same with people." For a heartbeat, she seemed to hear something beneath his words. Then the radio on her shoulder crackled with a coded update. She listened, eyes unfocused. "Signature authorization will take time," the enforcer reported into his own mic. The officer weighed the seconds, the hallway, the open door, the man who spoke softly and did not break. Finally, she inclined her head, not a concession, just a pause. "We will return," she said. Daniel nodded once. "Then you will knock, and you will still keep your voices low." The trio stepped back. The hallway lights dimmed a fraction as their suit power drained. Doors that had cracked open now closed. Somewhere a baby cried and was quieted. Daniel closed his door and slid the bolt. He waited, counting to 50, then 100, listening for boots, for radios, for the click that meant a second try. Nothing. He exhaled, long and slow. Lyra emerged from the back room, Mira asleep in her arms, her glow low and soft like moonlight behind clouds. "They will come again," she whispered. "I know," Daniel said. He took Mira carefully, laying her on the couch and covering her with the blanket. Then he turned to Lyra. "We won a few minutes. We use them." He moved to the kitchen wall and pulled a small panel. Behind it, a narrow service conduit ran down through the building's old spine, a maintenance shaft for heat lines and comm cables. "This saved my neighbors last winter when the vent systems failed," he said. "It can save you tonight." Lyra stared at the dark shaft. "I cannot steal your peace again." "You're not stealing anything," he said. "You're crossing a bridge." She met his eyes. The same calm stood there, the same promise. She nodded. "Where does it lead?" "To the river service tunnel," he said. "There's an old pump room under the east span. No cameras. I keep it running because no one else remembers it matters." She reached for his arm, then stopped, unsure of human customs. He solved the problem by offering his hand first, steady, warm. She held it for a second, then let go, her voice low. "I will not forget this." "Good," he said. "But remember something else too." "What?" "You still matter." The words landed like anchors that held, not weights that drowned. Lyra's posture straightened. She climbed into the conduit with careful grace, her glow dimmed to shadow. Daniel passed her a small bundle. Food, a thermal wrap, a map scratched on thin plastic. From the couch, Mira stirred. "Dad?" she mumbled. "Blue lady?" Daniel knelt beside her. "She's going to help me fix something important by the river," he whispered. "We'll see her again." Mira smiled sleepily. "Okay." Boots echoed faintly outside, distant, returning, or maybe only the building's old memory of them. Daniel closed the panel after Lyra and placed a shelf in front of it, hands working quick and quiet. He wiped the tea rings from the table. He put the tool back where it belonged. Then he turned off the light and stood by the door once more. A mechanic guarding a home, a father guarding a promise, a human guarding a life the world had tried to number as zero. In the conduit, Lyra moved downward into dark, one hand on the cable, the other pressed over her heart. The night wasn't empty anymore. It had direction. She wasn't falling. The city slept under heavy clouds and only the river moved, dark, silent, and endless. Deep beneath one of its bridges, Lyra crouched in the old service tunnel Daniel had shown her. The air was cold, filled with the hum of forgotten machines. The water pipes vibrated softly beside her, carrying the city's heartbeat. Every few minutes she heard footsteps above, metal boots, searching voices. The authority was still looking. They always came back. But this time she wasn't running from fear. She was moving towards something new. She clutched the small bundle Daniel had given her, a thermal wrap, a few food packs, and a scratched plastic map. His voice still echoed in her ears. "You still matter." That sentence felt like light in a place that had forgotten the sun. Lyra followed the map's path through the tunnel. Her glowing fingers brushed against rusted pipes, lighting her way. As she reached a corner, a sudden splash echoed from behind. She turned sharply, her heart racing. A small drone hovered near the ceiling, scanning. Its red eye flickered, detecting heat. Lyra pressed against the wall and slowed her breathing, lowering her body temperature again like Daniel had taught her. The drone whirred closer, confused by the readings. For a tense moment, it stopped right above her head, its light flashing across her skin. Then a spark of static, its systems glitched. Someone had overridden its signal. A familiar voice crackled through the darkness. "Told you I keep old machines running," Daniel's voice whispered through a communicator in her pocket. "Keep moving, Lyra, you're clear." She smiled faintly. "You fixed it remotely?" "Let's just say the city owes me a few broken circuits," he replied, his tone calm but strained. "Head east. You'll reach the river outlet soon." Lyra moved again, faster this time. The tunnel opened into a larger space, a forgotten pump room filled with cables and half-submerged platforms. Water dripped from broken valves, forming small pools that reflected her soft blue glow. For a moment she felt something strange. Peace. The hum of the city was distant, muffled by layers of stone. She could almost believe she was free. But the peace didn't last. A faint mechanical buzz filled the air. Then came voices, metallic, close. The enforcers had found an entry point. Lyra hid behind an old pump, pressing her hand over her glowing mark to dim it. The red lights of scanners swept across the room. "Search every section," an enforcer ordered. "The Sarathi signature is within 20 meters. She looked around desperately, eyes falling on a narrow maintenance ladder leading upward, to the underside of the bridge. She climbed quietly, each rung slick with water. The sound of boots echoed below her, closer and closer. As she reached the top, she pushed open a rusted hatch and crawled out. Rain was falling again, light and cold. The bridge stretched wide above the dark river, the same bridge she had once stood upon to end her life. Only this time, she wasn't alone. A light flashed from the far side, Daniel's vehicle parked by the rail. He stood in the rain, scanning the shadows. "Lyra," he shouted softly. "This way." She started toward him, but behind her came the clatter of metal boots. The enforcers had seen her glow. Their shouts echoed, "Target located." Blaster light burst through the rain, bright blue bolts cutting through the mist. Lyra ducked, her heart pounding. Daniel ran forward, grabbing her hand and pulling her behind his vehicle. "You shouldn't have come," she said breathlessly. "I told you I fix things," he replied. "You're one of them now." The shots stopped. Silence. Then a sharp voice. "The Sarathi officer. Lyra of Sarath, you are property of the Life Hall. You will surrender or they will be harmed." Lyra looked toward the officer standing with two soldiers. They had a hostage, Mira, small and scared, clinging to the officer's arm. Daniel froze. His breath caught and every line of his face went still. "No," he whispered. The officer smirked. "Step forward, alien. Come back to the hall, save the child." Lyra's heart broke. She saw the rain on Mira's cheeks. The same child who had smiled at her, given her warmth. The bridge beneath her seemed to tilt again, but this time she wasn't the one falling. Daniel's hand trembled. "Don't," he said. "They'll kill you." Lyra stepped out from behind the car. The enforcers raised their weapons, but she lifted her hand slowly. Her glow brightened until it painted the bridge in blue light. "Let her go," she said. Her voice carried across the wind. "Take me." "That's what you came for." The Sarathi officer hesitated. "Why protect the humans?" Lyra's eyes hardened. "Because they protected me when my own kind would not." The officer gestured sharply. "Grab her!" But before they could, the bridge shook. A deep rumble from below. The water surged upward, and one of the damaged pumps in the tunnel exploded, shaking the structure. Daniel grabbed Mira and pulled her back as debris rained down. Lyra ran toward them, diving forward, covering them both with her body as sparks lit the night. When the noise faded, the enforcers were gone, swept by the broken section of the bridge. Smoke and rain mixed in the air. Daniel looked at her, astonished. "You saved us." Lyra smiled faintly, exhausted. "The bridge took something from me once," she said softly. "Tonight I took it back." She looked at Mira, who wrapped small arms around her neck. "You're safe now," Lyra whispered. And as the sirens of rescue vehicles echoed far away, the alien woman who once wanted to die stood on the same bridge, alive, defiant and no longer alone. The sun rose slow and golden over the city. The storm had passed, leaving mist over the river and light glinting off broken glass. The bridge, once a place of despair, now looked peaceful. Its edges were scarred from the night's chaos, but it stood strong, like the people who had survived upon it. Lyra sat quietly on the curb, her silver-blue skin shining softly in the morning light. Her clothes were torn, her arms scratched, but her eyes were calm. She had not slept, yet she felt no exhaustion. Daniel and Mira sat beside her, wrapped in a blanket. The child leaned her head on Lyra's shoulder, already half asleep again, safe and warm. For a long time, no one spoke. Only the gentle hum of drones cleaning debris filled the silence. Finally, Daniel turned to her. "You stopped the pumps yourself, didn't you?" he asked quietly. Lyra looked down at her glowing hands. "I only changed their flow," she said softly. "The old systems were breaking. I used the energy built inside me to overload the pressure lines." Daniel shook his head slowly. "You could have died," she smiled faintly. "I almost did once, but not this time." He studied her for a moment. There was something different about her now, not just bravery, but peace. The woman who had stood on that bridge to end her life had become someone new. "Do you think they'll come back?" he asked. "They will try," she said, "but they lost more than soldiers last night. They lost silence. Now the city knows what they were doing in the life halls. Others like me might hear about it. They will ask questions," Daniel nodded. "Then it's a start." Mira stirred and looked up sleepily. "Blue lady," she whispered. Lyra smiled down at her. "Yes, little one?" Mira reached up, touching the faint glow on Lyra's cheek. "You're smiling," she said softly. Lyra blinked in surprise. "Am I?" Daniel chuckled. "You are. And it looks good on you." Lyra laughed quietly, a sound almost fragile, as if unused to joy. "Perhaps I finally remembered how," she said. A medical team approached from the far side of the bridge, their suits shining white in the sun. One of them waved. "Are you injured?" he called. Daniel stood. "We're fine," he replied. "Just tired." The medic pointed at Lyra. "She needs a scan." "She's not registered here." Daniel stepped between them calmly. "She's with me," he said. "No need for scans today." The medic hesitated, then nodded. "All right. The emergency zone's open if you need it." As they left, Daniel looked back at the river. "You know," he said, "the first time I drove across this bridge after my wife's death, I almost didn't make it home. I sat here for hours. I thought about turning the car around and driving until I disappeared." Lyra watched him silently. "What stopped you?" she asked. He smiled a little. "A stranger. Old man walking home. Knocked on my window and said, 'Son, you're still breathing. Don't waste it.' Then he walked away." Lyra nodded slowly. "He said to you what you said to me." "Maybe kindness works that way," he said. Passed forward, Lyra looked down at Mira, who had fallen back asleep in her lap. "Then I will pass it forward too," she whispered. "There are others like me. Others who think they are worthless because they cannot give life. Maybe I can show them they can still protect it." Daniel nodded. "That sounds like a purpose," she smiled faintly. "A new one." Weeks passed. The city repaired its bridges, but whispers of that night spread quietly. People spoke of an alien woman who saved a child and a human who stood against enforcers with nothing but courage. No one knew their names, but everyone remembered the light that covered the bridge, a glow like hope. Lyra began working with Daniel in the machine yards. Her hands, once branded as useless, fixed engines, restored power lines, and taught humans how to blend Serathi energy tech with human systems. At night, she told Mira stories of Serath, not of its cruelty, but of its stars, oceans, and silver trees that hummed in the wind. Mira would listen with wide eyes, and sometimes fall asleep in Lyra's lap. Daniel would watch them from the doorway, a quiet smile on his face. One evening, the sky turned crimson as the sun sank behind the towers. Lyra stood again on the bridge, the same one where her life had almost ended. She leaned against the rail, watching the golden water below. The city lights flickered on one by one, reflected in her glowing skin. Behind her, footsteps approached. Daniel joined her side, holding 2 steaming cups. "You still like tea, right?" She smiled. "Especially when it's shared." They drank in silence. The wind was gentle tonight. Daniel glanced at her. "Do you ever think about that night?" Lyra nodded. "Every day, but not with pain. The bridge used to be where I lost myself. Now it's where I found meaning." He looked over the river. "You rebuilt more than machines, Lyra." She turned her gaze to the horizon. And you rebuilt more than a bridge, Daniel. Mira ran up from behind laughing, her small feet pattering on the pavement. Dad, blue lady! Come see! She pointed toward the eastern sky where the first stars appeared, bright, endless, free. Lyra looked up, her eyes glowing softly. The stars look different tonight, she said. Daniel smiled. Maybe because you're finally looking at them. The three of them stood together, the wind brushing past gently. The bridge lights flickered, reflecting off the river like scattered hope. Lyra took Mira's small hand, and Daniel's voice echoed softly beside her, warm, steady and true. Remember what I said that night? He asked. She nodded. Every word, he smiled. Then say it back to me. Lyra turned toward him, her voice clear, gentle, filled with all the light she had once lost. You still matter. And for the first time since she had left her world, she believed it. The camera of the story would fade out slowly, three figures on a golden bridge under the morning sun, the river whispering below, the universe vast and kind once more.